Fire swept through Atlanta like a vengeful storm, leaving only ash and silence. The infamous March to the Sea was a brutal military campaign during the American Civil War. Led by Union General William Tecumseh Sherman, it swept through Georgia from November 15th to December 21st, 1864, leaving destruction in its wake. Over 60,000 Union soldiers carved a path of destruction stretching 300 miles to Savannah, Georgia, leaving behind charred towns, shattered railroads, and ruined lives. Welcome to Historical Digs, where we uncover secrets from the annals of history. The strategy behind the march. Sherman's military objectives. On September 2, 1864, General William Tecumseh Sherman captured Atlanta, a vital hub for Confederate supply lines. Its factories and warehouses powered the South's war machine, making Atlanta's fall a catastrophic blow to Confederate morale and strategy. After burning Atlanta in November 1864, General William Sherman launched his notorious March to the Sea to cripple the Confederacy's ability to continue fighting. Working with Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant, Sherman believed the South's defeat required more than battlefield victories. It demanded the destruction of its infrastructure and spirit. His scorched-earth tactics targeted railroads, farms, and factories. Sherman knew that foraging and widespread destruction would break the spirit of civilians and soldiers alike, leaving Georgia in ruins. Sherman's troops, known as bummers, abandoned traditional supply lines, living off the land and seizing food and livestock from farms along the way. They left devastation in their wake, ensuring the South's resources were depleted. To further dismantle Confederate operations, Sherman's men tore up railroads, heating and twisting the tracks into Sherman's neckties, symbols of destruction that paralyzed transportation. By isolating General Robert E. Lee's forces in Virginia, Sherman's march tightened the Union's grip, accelerating the South's collapse and leaving behind a legacy of destruction and bitterness that echoed for generations. Sherman's scorched earth policy. Sherman's scorched earth tactics weren't just about destroying physical assets. They aimed to break the psychological resistance of Southern civilians and was rooted in his belief that destroying the South's ability to sustain its armies was the quickest path to Union victory. He ordered his men to burn crops, seize livestock, and destroy food stores, ensuring the Confederates could not use these resources. By making the consequences of war painfully honest, Sherman hoped to demoralize the population and erode support for the Confederate cause. He viewed this as a necessary evil to shorten the war and save lives in the long run. But was it justified? Sherman wrote to General Henry Halleck, "This war differs from European wars. We are fighting not only armies but a hostile people. Old and young, rich and poor must feel the hard hand of war." By dismantling railroads and bridges and targeting supply routes, Sherman aimed to paralyze Confederate operations. Entire towns became ghostly ruins. Fields once ripe with harvest were reduced to ash, leaving survivors to grapple with hunger and despair. Are you passionate about uncovering history's hidden stories? Hit the like and subscribe button and let us know what other untold tales you'd like us to explore. The Path of Destruction. A trail of flames and ash. The march through Georgia wasn't just a military campaign. It was a calculated obliteration. Picture this: entire towns engulfed in flames, their skeletal remains silhouetted against the smoldering horizon. Railways, the lifelines of commerce and connection, lay twisted and useless, their iron spines shattered beneath the weight of vengeance. Once ripe with the promise of harvest, fields were reduced to barren wastelands of charred stubble. Smoke clung to the air, a haunting reminder of deliberate devastation. Sherman split his 60,000 troops into two wings. The right wing, led by Oliver O. Howard, pushed forward with the 15th Corps under Peter J. Osterhaus and the 17th Corps under Francis P. Blair Jr. The left wing, commanded by Henry W. Slocum, advanced with the 14th Corps under Jefferson C. Davis and the 20th Corps under Alpheus S. Williams. Judson Kilpatrick led the cavalry, shadowing their path. Chaos followed, as orders to control foraging were largely ignored. Farms and plantations were stripped bare, leaving ruin in their wake. The two wings moved along separate routes, 20 to 40 miles apart. One toward Macon, the other toward Augusta, before turning toward Milledgeville. Confederate forces of 8,000 cavalry under Joseph Wheeler and scattered militia under Gustavus W. Smith were powerless to halt the advance. By November 23, the state capital, Milledgeville, surrendered without a fight. Sherman claimed the governor's mansion and Capitol building, marking the fall of Georgia's heart without firing a single shot. The destruction in Georgia. Sherman's march left an indelible mark on Georgia, devastating communities and disrupting countless lives. Families were ruthlessly uprooted, forced to flee with only what they could hastily gather. The displaced roamed aimlessly, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. Women, children, and the elderly bore the harshest burdens, enduring cold nights under open skies and the relentless pangs of hunger. Adding to their suffering, some women endured unspeakable atrocities, including sexual violence at the hands of General Sherman's soldiers. Every step forward became a harrowing journey through despair. Sherman's march caused an estimated $100 million in damage to Georgia's infrastructure. Before the war, the South contributed 38% of U.S. agricultural output. By 1870, even after 4 years of recovery, it was down to 28%, leaving the South economically weakened and trailing behind the rest of the nation. A Georgia planter wrote, "I had the misfortune to be in the line of Sherman's march and lost everything: Devon cows, merino sheep, Chester hogs, Shanghai chickens, and in fact everything but my land, my wife and children, and the clothing we had at the time." Even decades later, counties affected by the march lagged in agricultural investment and economic recovery. The lasting impact on the South, the economic and emotional scars. Sherman's march to the sea remains controversial due to its use of total war, a strategy that targeted not just Confederate forces but also civilian infrastructure. While it crippled the Confederacy's resources, it also caused immense suffering for ordinary citizens. The march's timing adds to the debate, as General Robert E. Lee surrendered just a few months later, leading many to question whether such widespread destruction was essential so close to the war's end. The destruction of wealthy plantations, the backbone of Southern prosperity, dismantled the slave-based economy, forcing the South into sharecropping and tenant farming. This economic shift trapped many farmers, especially former slaves and poor whites, in cycles of debt and poverty. By 1870, the regions ravaged by Sherman's march experienced a stark economic decline. with farm values plummeting 20% more than in unaffected areas. The destruction also caused a 14% reduction in the value of improved farmland and livestock. Even as late as 1920, counties affected by the march lagged behind in agricultural investment, as evidenced by consistently lower levels of improved land compared to untouched regions. Emotional and psychological scars. The march shattered morale and left psychological wounds that lasted generations. Southerners who once saw themselves as invincible defenders of their homeland now faced humiliation and helplessness. The sight of burning farms, ruined homes, and desperate families bred a sense of loss and bitterness that fueled resentment toward the North during Reconstruction and beyond. For many, Sherman's tactics symbolized the brutality of total war, and the trauma became a central part of the Southern identity, feeding the lost cause narrative. Survivors passed down the stories of hardship and defiance, keeping the pain of defeat alive in the region's culture and memory. Even today, Sherman's March remains one of the most debated campaigns in U.S. history. While it achieved its military objective, it left a legacy of ashes, scars, and unanswered questions about the moral cost of war. Sherman's March to the Sea was a pivotal campaign in the Civil War, devastating Georgia's infrastructure and economy while breaking the Confederacy's will to fight. By cutting a 300-mile path of destruction from Atlanta to Savannah, Sherman crippled supply lines, shattered Southern morale, and showcased the Union's unstoppable force. This scorched-earth strategy hastened the Confederacy's collapse, paving the way for Union victory and the war's end. Sherman's March to the Sea didn't just end a war. It reshaped a region, leaving behind ashes, scars, and unanswered questions about the cost of victory and survival. Thank you for joining us in discovering the brutal truth about General Sherman's March to the Sea. Don't forget to subscribe and come back for more history digs.